So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, December the 5th of 2025. This is Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers, episode number 335. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is The Way to Bee. So I'm really glad that you're here. Thanks for joining me. December's off to a good start here, and our opening temperatures are really bad. We'll get to that in a second. If you want to know what we're going to talk about today, please look down in the video description. You'll see all the topics listed in order, and below that you will see links related to some of the things that we talk about today, so you can do a deeper dive if you want to. If you've got something on your mind and you just need to talk to somebody right away about your bees, and you want to show a picture, share a video sequence or something like that, join the Way to Bee Fellowship. It's on Facebook. The other thing is, maybe you're driving somewhere or you're doing some work. You're driving your snowplow right now. I don't want you to wreck it. So this is available as a podcast. That's right. You can do a Google search for The Way to Bee podcast, and then you just listen to it while you drive places. You won't wreck your car. So I think that's pretty good. All the topics we're going to talk about today were submitted during the past week, some as recent as this morning. So that's pretty good response time. And I know what you want to know, because you want to know what's going on outside because the weather's dynamic. Check this out. Minus 6.2 degrees Fahrenheit. That's minus 21 Celsius. So it's popsicle cold out there. And we had the largest moon. And the highest, they say, the highest in the sky. So it really lit up the landscape because of all the snow that we've got out there. And it's windy too. How windy? 2.5 miles per hour, which is 4 kilometers per hour. And for the sailors out there, that's 2.1 knots. It's 89% relative humidity. So it's actually pretty humid considering how cold it is. And we have accumulated 11 inches of snow, which is not a lot for my area, but it's not nothing. Combine that with the cold temperatures, and we have travel restrictions sometimes on the corridor through here. And I know what you want to know too, is it going to get warmer in the days ahead? How about in the next 7 days? What is the high temp going to be right here in the northeastern part of the United States, northwestern part of the state of Pennsylvania? What do you think the high is going to be? That's right, 39 degrees Fahrenheit. That's as hot as it's going to get. So for those of you who missed your window of opportunity to treat with oxalic acid vaporization to knock out those dispersal phase Varroa destructor mites, it's too cold now to do that. So it's too late. Sorry, you didn't do what you could. Well, you could. And the opening sequences, of course, there's no bees in there. This is the birds coming to the feeder. And so the environment around here needs a lot of wild birds because we want them to take out a lot of pests, by the way, and they do a great job of it. And some of the species of birds that were shown, the tufted titmouse for starters, the nuthatch, dark-eyed juncos, there's grass sparrows, there are purple finches, there's all kinds of stuff out there. And just my word to those who take care of backyard birds, if you start feeding, keep feeding. They become dependent upon what you put out there. There's also a Donny woodpecker. So anyway, snow-covered hives, by the way, is that good or bad? If you have a foot of snow piled up on the top of your beehives, and how about piled up against the side of your beehive? Is that good? It is, because snow is an insulator. So look at the temperature. I mean, minus 6.2. It's not that cold underneath all that snow. So it's a benefit to your bees. So don't take that off, but snow-covered hive, good. Blocked entrance, bad. We need them to be able to ventilate. And I did walk around and look at the entrances to see how much snow is piled up against them. And there's always that tiny gap there that air can flow through. And you might think that's adequate. But if you could just scoop out the opening a little bit and make sure that your bees can ventilate as they need, because my bees and my colonies do not have top ventilation. Therefore, they control how much air comes in or does not. By not circulating air out, they don't draw new air in. It's pretty interesting. So, but if the entrance is blocked, there's nothing they can do, because what's going to happen? It'll melt and freeze over because it melts in the sun, even when it's really cold. What else? Oh, this is a great time to do thermal scans of your hives. Now, the other thing is thermal scans. It doesn't matter if you're using the FLIR system or if you've got some other surface reading temperature unit, right? Try not to do that during the day. Wait till after sunset. Wait till things cool out. And sunset's early this time of year anyway. you're reading surface temperature. So if the sun is warming different surfaces, it could give you a false reading that there might be something alive in your hive when it isn't. And with these temps below freezing, you can go out there, and even the insulated hives have a mild heat signature. So you know, what do you know? Alive or dead. That's it. That's what you know. And so things are alive around here. And just because we're just getting going here, there are sales online right now. So maybe you shouldn't be watching this right now. Maybe you should be shopping, because they carried out, it should have ended during Black Friday and Cyber Monday and all that stuff, but they've kept the sales going, so there are great opportunities with bee equipment and everything else. Check that stuff out. Also, check your emergency feed status. That's it. Let's jump right into the very first question for today, which comes from Julie from Nokomis, or Nokomis, I probably messed that up, Florida, right here in the good old United States. Says, I've tried to find information on this question, but I've had unsuccessful searches. Anyway, I had a hive with a 32 mite count a week ago. 32 mites. And at home, and I couldn't do an OA vaporization, so I put Viroxan strips in. Can I do an OA vape now? But I'm not sure if it's advisable with the strips in, and I don't really want to take them out after only a week. Just wondering if you think it would be detrimental to do a vaporization while the strips are installed. Opinion? Thank you. So, we should probably talk about what it is, by the way. Viroxan and OA, oxalic acid. And so those are both methods of delivering oxalic acid to your hive. One's an extended release method. That's what the Viroxan strips are. And so when you put those in there, it's long exposure release, low dose, long exposure, extended release. Once those are in there, they're in there. In other words, they're dosed, and by that I mean the percentage of oxalic acid that's in there that your bees are going to be exposed to. And this has to be approved because it's a miticide. And there was some discussion last week about the dosing being increased, specifically at Better Bee Apabioxol. So Dr. David Peck talked about that. And when I researched this particular question, by the way, today, Dr. Peck was one of the contributors to the research as well, and it's pretty darn new. So anyway, good news, bad news. Good news, the Viroxan is probably still doing its thing. It's over the brood frames and stuff like that. And you've put it in for the extended period, and guess what we can't do now? We can't do another delivery method of the same treatment. And by same treatment, I mean oxalic acid. That's what's working. There are a lot of different delivery methods that are described, of course. You can do the dribble method. You can do the extended release now, of course, which is what Viroxan is. And you can do the vaporization or sublimation, which is oxalic acid vaporization. Most people just say OAV. Anyway, you can't do both because you're increasing the dose. And the way they get these things approved, I know it's the Wild West out there for backyard beekeepers, and a lot of people are just saying, I just keep dumping it in there. Oxalic acid doesn't hurt anything, I just keep doing it. Please don't. Please don't. Do everything you can integrated pest management wise. And for me, that means wintertime, insulated inner cover, no top venting. I'll get to my point on that. And treat when brood is low. Both of these have higher efficacy when brood is low. So, and then have a screened bottom board that is enclosed, that's key, with a removable tray so that you can get the detritus out, collect those little varroa mites that fall through the screen. And there was a very good article that came out in the American Bee Journal for November about that very thing, validating what I've been sharing with you for the longest time, that you should have an enclosed screen bottom board. Because the varroa destructor mites that fall in there, somebody else said, well, they're dead anyway, so that doesn't do anything for it. No, they're not. They're alive. I video them. I pull those trays, I look at those little mites scooting around in there. So we want them to go through screens and stay down there. So that's all mite control. The reason I'm saying all of this, okay, by not venting, we're also not helping the mites reproduce in winter when the brooding starts up again. High CO2 levels are something that occurs when you don't have a lot of top venting. Also, high humidity. These are things that Varroa destructor mites do not like. They don't like super low humidity because they can desiccate. They also don't like super high humidity because it makes it difficult for them. Your bees can do fine in that high CO2 environment too. So the bees control it all, which reduces mite reproduction. Slap on there some Viroxan, and when they hit the dispersal phase, what the heck is the dispersal phase anyway? Well, that's when the mites are not protected by a pupa cap in the cell, because these treatments, oxalic acid vapor and oxalic acid dribble and oxalic acid extended release, do not go through the cappings on the pupating bees, workers, or the drones, right? So we need extended release that at some moment during that treatment period, the mites are going to be exposed and they're going to, in theory, die and end up in your screen bottom board in the tray that you're going to pull out, that you're going to look at to validate the drop-off. So it's really darn good. But you have to pick a method. If you're hearing it from me, you have to follow the label. You have to pick a method. And the delivery method, I won't even name all the different ways that people want to give their bees oxalic acid. EasyOx is approved. Apabioxol is approved. So for dribble, for vaporization, sublimation, we'll say both things there. And of course, there are extended release methods. Okay. So when you hear about other methods of delivering oxalic acid, if it's not on a label that's been approved, that's not approved. So rather than go down the list of all the different ways that people want you to deliver it, please stick with what's been tested and validated through scientific scrutiny. Moving on to question number 2. This comes from Alberta First Podcast. That's interesting. Can you harvest honeycomb with a flow hive? And this is on a flow hive video that I posted. It's been a couple of months now. My 9th year with the flow hive. And so often this question comes up. So I'm glad that this was asked because they think that you cannot get beeswax and comb honey, for example, out of it because you have mechanized plastic frames that you get your honey out of. And then where would the wax come from? Well, did you know, by the way, for those of you who don't want to spend fat stacks on a Flow Hive 2 Plus super nuclear, all the bells and whistles hive, they have a hybrid hive that's much cheaper. It only has 3 flow frames in it, and the rest of the frames in the Honey Super are foundationless or have foundation or whatever you want to put in there. So for those who want some honey through the flow frames, but they also want to have the ability to make comb honey or to just be able to get beeswax, then the hybrid is what I recommend. And I would send you to my website, which is thewaytobe.org, which is also where you go to submit a question. And there's a page marked the Flow Experience. And there you can get $50 off of your purchase on the Flow Hive website. But you're not going to want to do that. Here's why. They're offering bigger discounts just by going straight to the website without me. So you don't need to do that. You can get more right now for that. But try the hybrid. And I don't own one, by the way. And while I was looking at that in response to this question, I thought I need to get one of the Flow Hive hybrid tops just so I can test it out. I already know it's probably going to work well. And I think the wood on that is Acuria, something like that. It's really fast growing, very light pine style, almost cypress style wood there from Australia. So anyway, that's it. You can get cut comb and beeswax from flow hives and have the flow frames that work so well. Question number 3 comes from Michelle in Michigan, Troy, Michigan, actually. If you can only buy one queen cage from Better Bee, would it be the 2 frame or the 1 frame isolation or introduction cage? Which would you use the most often? Okay, so I keep this here. And behind me, by the way, those are queen introduction cages. This is a queen isolation cage. And as described, they come from better bee. And so what's the difference? Let's talk about queen isolation versus queen introduction. Queen introduction means the bar spacing is so fine that even workers can't get through it. So if you're introducing a queen, you bought one through the mail, you got one from a breeder, you spent fat stacks because this is a very valuable queen and you don't want your bees to kill the queen. You take a frame, this is just for example. This frame's from 21st Bee, by the way. Anyway, you take a frame of capped brood, or mostly capped brood. You put them in here. No workers, just the brood. This is for queen introduction. You put your queen in here, turn her loose. You scoot this along the top so you don't smash the queen, and you cover her up. Now, the queen introduction cage, no other bees can get to them. So what happens is your queen gets fed through the bars by nurse bees in the hive through trophallaxis. They cannot get in and sting the queen to death. So they either feed her or they don't, which they will because I've never seen them not feed a queen in a cage like this. And they just can't bite onto her and sting her and kill her and pull her wings off and all the things that sometimes they seem to want to do, particularly if the beekeeper is messed up and still has a queen somewhere in the hive when they bring in this new queen. So this saves the queen. Now, the capped workers that are in there, they emerge from their cells and they attend to the queen. So they become her retinue right away. How do they get their food and resources? From other bees in the hive. They continually feed them through the bars. So the question is, first of all, queen introduction cage, which is the tiny bars, nothing gets through it, or the queen isolation cage, which means that the queen can't get through the bars, which is what this is. But workers can. They can pass through, so they can do full attendance on the frames. They can continue to build honeycomb and stuff like that. And they can nourish, when the queen starts laying eggs in there, they can start taking care of the open larvae. So then the other part of that, which one, first of all, would I prefer between the two of those? Introduction, isolation. If I can only buy one, I'm going to ask for the queen isolation cage. So it just holds the queen. Workers can pass through. Drones cannot pass through. So it's also great for containing drones that you want to do mite counts on and things like that. The next part is, do I want the two-frame system, which is what this is. This is deep. They also make a medium. Or would I mostly use the single frame version? So I would use the single frame version. That's why this one sits down here. This one sits here in my YouTube studio because I almost never need it. The others have been used a lot. So the queen isolation cages are what I use when I'm trying to keep a swarm from going somewhere, for example. So if I collected a swarm, I find the queen, I can put her in one of these, stick her in there with a bunch of workers, close it up without smashing the queen, and guess what? They're going to stay in the hive that I put her in until I feel like letting her go. The advantage, why would they even make a two-frame system? Because now we can have over 6,000 bees in production in here. More than that, let's see, it's about, if you have deep frames in here, that's about 3,000 bees per side if they capped them all. So we got almost 12,000 bees in here. She stays in production for a much longer time. And then you can also do controls, right? You could do a Demery method almost with this. By isolating your queen, keeping control of where she lays eggs, and then you can start shuffling frames out here because they'll emerge, the workers come off of them, and now you've got a brood break out here. And you can do all kinds of manipulation with it. The single frame takes up 2 frame spaces in your hive. The double frame system takes up 3 standard frame spaces in your hive. So, single frame, deep version, queen isolation over introduction. That's my personal preference. You get them from Better Bee. They're going to be at the North American Honeybee Expo if you're going to be there. And I would recommend taking advantage of free shipping from anybody who's going to be at the expo selling stuff. So that's it. That's what, not only would I use it more often, that's what I do use more often. I have 3 queen isolation cages, single frame deeps, out on the way to Bee Academy building because that's where I go to grab stuff when I'm doing swarm control. And I don't have any swarm control going on right now because you saw the temps. Everybody's buttoned up for winter. Question number 4, this comes from Jerry from Dorchester, Illinois. I've been listening to as much information as I can to get a hold of how to have the greatest success overwintering in Illinois. I've heard from multiple sources that insulation is key, and I know you always insulate hive tops. My confusion comes from the importance of bees entering the torpor state to reduce food consumption. Are we insulation? It says, are we insulation, but I think insulating strictly to avoid condensation above the cluster, or are we wanting the bees cold, just not too cold? I currently have all my hives wrapped in Reflectex, and they have Reflectex on top of the hive with 2-inch insulation on top of that. So this is from Jerry. So, what's the purpose? The purpose is to get your bees, first of all, out of the wind. That's number one. So well-fitting colonies of bees, right? So the way the hive goes together, there should be no open joints, gaps, or leaks, or things like that. Your bees have no idea what's headed their way weather-wise. There are locally adapted bees, and that's a good thing. Because bees respond to the environmental cues. So it's mostly nutritionally based, right? So when pollen and nectar start to dry up in the environment, they start to reduce brood inside the hive, and they begin to cluster and save their resources for winter. That's also when they start robbing out other colonies because they have this big workforce. Anyway, what can we do as beekeepers? Now, the standard Langstroth hive has been around for a very long time. The Langstroth hive came out and did not have insulation on it. So later on, quilt boxes came out. Quilt boxes are thick boxes that sit on top of the hive, and people wanted to quilt their bees in. So create something that would be using wood chips or woolen or something like that, and absorb moisture as it passes through the top of the hive and out through a little weep hole, some tiny opening in the top of the hive so that they could vent off and keep moisture out in winter. Then later, insulation came along. Modern insulation, like rigid foam board. And we also have cool stuff like Reflectex, which is described in this question. Reflectex is the foil-faced bubble wrap. So there's also double bubble. So that's double layers of bubbles and foil face on both sides. That prevents the movement of air wherever it gets placed. So we no longer need wood shavings and things like that to absorb the moisture that rises through the top of the hive because we've encapsulated the top of the hive and stopped all the air movement for the reasons that I've already described today. So when you I do incremental changes. And I've described this before, but I'll do it again because we're in winter right now and Jerry wants to know. So wrapping the hive with Reflectex. Here's my thinking on that. People have historically wrapped their hives with interesting things like roof felt. I want you to look up the material composition of roof felt, which, by the way, do you know what it's for? It goes on your roof underneath your shingles so that when you nail your shingles on your roof, you have an additional barrier that prevents moisture from getting through your roof sheathing, and it keeps your shingles from deteriorating, and it also provides additional waterproofing when the nails go through it. So it's really not designed to be on a beehive. So I would never personally recommend wrapping tar paper, but I understand the incentive to do it to prevent air from blowing through your hive. And since tar paper, again, it's really old, that's roof felt, used to be called tar paper. So I understand because they didn't have Tyvek and house wraps and things like that back then. And we have modern materials that we can wrap our hives with if we want to. So what Jerry's done is wrapped the double bubble or the Reflectex around the hive too. So I would do that if my bees were not already doing well in well-constructed 3/4 inch material hives. This is key, with insulation on top. And even the nucleus hives that are very small, they're 5 frame deeps, wooden hives. I don't wrap any of them. We also do have insulated hives here, because what good is it to say one thing is okay and another thing's not, or one thing's better, or significantly better? That word significantly is something that scientists use a lot. They might say there's a difference, there's a moderate difference, no significant difference, and so that's key. So I have Apame hives here, I have Layens hives here that are insulated. I have a very thick-walled, long Langstroth hive here. So we have insulated and uninsulated, and until recently I had the Lyson hive here. So we look then to see how they manage themselves going through winter, right? So what's the point of the insulation? To keep them tightly clustered, as written here. Should they be cold enough that they're in a state of torpor? Because remember, honeybees do not hibernate. They go into a state of torpor, which is just a lower metabolism rate, but they're aware and fully functioning, right? They're just not moving all around. So there is evidence that if you, for example, use like the Lyson or the Bemax hives or the Hive IQ, all these heavily insulated polystyrene hives, which some people just call poly hives, they're so insulated that the bees are capable of warming the space, even though I understand that's not their intention. They're warming the cluster in winter, which is to keep themselves alive. The center of that cluster is where some of that winter brood is going to be, and the cluster is not static. It moves through the hive. If it's a Langstroth with boxes, it moves up. And if it's a horizontal hive, they're gradually moving horizontally through and over, under, and around the frames there and getting onto the honey. So there is evidence that the well-insulated hives have more movement. In other words, the cluster is a little looser. There's a little more movement in there. And some people have reported that the heavily insulated hives generate far more condensation than some of the uninsulated hives do. But my only test for this, coming out of winter every year, is looking at the clusters, seeing where they are, seeing how much consumption there is. When you get a hive kit, there's no recommendation for insulation. If it's a standard Langstroth hive kit, you'll have usually 2 deep boxes in it, 2 medium boxes. A brand new beekeeper will often put all of that together all at once, put 1 colony of bees in it and expect them to fill it up. There's an uninsulated inner cover, and there's a telescoping outer cover with very thin material over the top, and it's usually clad with aluminum or tin or something like that. No insulation. With that setup, it also has the inner cover pre-notched because you're going to have to vent through that top. And that's because it's just as cold as it is outside on that cover. Worse than that, when I started doing thermal scans of those hives in the summertime, 135 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface of that. So now, and the bees manage it. See, that's the problem. Bees manage it. But it takes a lot of effort. They have to do a lot of cooling, a lot of bringing in of water so they can spread the water around and fan it to cool the hive, and they have to cool it a lot. We save them that effort by adding insulation, by shutting off that vent that's in the top of those hives, by sizing the hive correctly for the population inside of it. So for a brand new swarm of bees that's in a hive, you wouldn't have 2 deeps, 2 mediums, inner cover, outer cover, and expect them to do well. We want them to have enough resources to get through winter. And when I put insulated inner covers, I built feeder shims for my hives. I thought that was a great thing to do. And right after that, Bee Smart Designs came out with their insulated inner cover, and I shifted to that. And that alone cut the consumption of winter food in half. Instead of 74 to 80, 90 pounds of honey to get a full-size mature colony through winter, I could get them through around 35 pounds of honey. So just the insulated inner cover alone. Now, should I do more insulation than that? Well, that's a question. What do you want out of your bees? What do you need them to be able to do? And there's this question about whether bees suffer from the cold. Do they suffer from the cold? Are they doing okay? And then other people say, I don't want my bees to survive. I want them to be thriving. And you need these big numbers in spring. Do you though? Because here's what happens. My insulated hives and my non-insulated hives, although they all have insulated covers, the only one out there without an insulated cover right now is the top bar hive. But it has thick wooden slats, top bars on it. So anyway, in spring, their numbers are strong, their reproduction is strong, and they start foraging and they swarm right on cue unless you do something about it, managing them. So in my mind, as a backyard beekeeper, which most of you are, do I need greater numbers in spring? If I were somebody who had to be hired out, if I wanted to sell pollination services to local apple orchards and things like that, I need higher numbers of bees. As a backyard beekeeper, I don't. In fact, I want them healthy, but I want them small. So what I'm trying to do here in the state of Pennsylvania is have my colonies nice and strong coming into spring, not bubbling over number-wise from the hives that are in, and I still have troubles controlling their numbers. This is the same whether the hives are insulated around the sides or not. So, in other words, the Layens hives are performing the same as my standard Langs. The long Langstroth hive performs the same as, the vertical hives that are, even for example, the Apamea hives, which are insulated. I like Apamea hives because they're so well configured with all kinds of options. No painting, no preservation, stuff like that. A lot of advantages to that. But as far as the numbers go, and the overall health of the bees, I don't see a significant difference in those hives that are insulated on the sidewalls or not, just well fit. That is important. If your hives are coming apart and there's gaps in airflow and things like that, when these winds pick up, that makes a difference. The insulation itself does not make a significant difference in my climate. You want to talk to somebody who's doing things in extreme temperatures. People that live in the far north, people that live in the Klondike, like Etienne Tardif, they need heavy insulation on the sidewalls too, or their bees would die. Here where I am, not so much. So you need to evaluate where you live and what's important. Here's what I don't like. I don't want to have to pull off a bunch of insulation and put it in storage through the summer. So whatever levels of insulation we have on our hives here, it remains the same year-round. Because they need protection from summer heat just as much as they need protection from the winter cold. And that's why through the years, by testing out these different parameters, making incremental changes, adding little insulation properties to your hives, and then seeing how they work out through all the seasons, you'll find out. Because a well-insulated hive, by the way, also makes it easier on your bees midsummer when they're trying to keep things cool. It works both ways. Question number 5 comes from La Sancho 46. So I see here that it's Lisa Sancho. It says, I can't believe I miss you when you were in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I had a good time down at Fort Wayne, Indiana, by the way. Nice drive. It says, I'm a new beekeeper. I don't know where to look for location, etc. Anyway, my question, I have fondant on, but based on what you said here, I may have done it wrong. I have fondant packs directly on the frames. I have a deep and a medium on now. On top of the frames, the fondant, I have a feeder shim. So a feeder shim is just a little, usually 1.5 inch or 2-inch frame that goes around right on top of your top box and makes space for you to put your fondant packs right on the frames if you want them there. And so anyway, it's on top of the frames of the fondant. I have a feeder shim, a BeeSmart inner insulated cover with 3 layers of Reflectex in the outer lid. You said to put insulation on first, then the fondant, then more insulation. Is that correct? Trying to keep my bees warm this winter has me concerned. I'm not doing enough. So here's the thing, and this is a concern for a lot of new beekeepers that are trying to get through their first winter. If you read the packet on the fondant, it probably says put it directly on the frames, and that would be the most efficient way for your bees to access the fondant. So if you had a fondant pack, let's say that's what this is, and let's say we cut the little hole in it and we open our hive up and we put a feeder shim around the top frames and we put this right on there. Now the shim is around it so you don't smash it down. Your inner cover goes here, and then insulation, outer cover, and so on. That's fine. That's efficient for your bees. But here's what I did. I have the insulated inner cover on, which is where it always is already, directly on top, because remember, the bees have sealed with propolis all around. I don't like, personally, making configuration changes just for winter. Because often you make those changes at the end of the year when it's really cold and your bees can't propolize and seal things up the way they can when it's warm. So often people are making changes of putting quilt boxes on and all these other things that are new to the hive, new to the bees, just because the weather is changing. I don't do that. Therefore, there's no feeder shim like that there. There's the inner cover. The feeder shim is above that insulated inner cover, and it's constant. It's always there. I don't store it. I don't change it. I don't shift it out. Insulated inner cover, this goes on top of that. There's that central hole in the Be Smart Designs insulated inner cover. The Apame feeders also stay constant year-round, and the bees will propolize up all those little vent holes on those. And you can put your fondant in those and then shift to spring. If you need to, you can put sugar syrup in the same feeder space. That's why I do that. It doesn't change year-round. And again, through the years, my bees have demonstrated that they come through that little hole and they access the fondant up in the insulated space just fine, well away from the top bars of the top box of your beehive. So this also makes it easier for me to just pull it out and put another one on and close it right back up. If they're on the top bars, now, if I want to even check on it just for a moment, I have to pull the outer cover off, all the insulation out, inner cover off, see this in the feeder shim. And if it's all good, then I did all that for nothing, close it right back up, and you're good to go. But I saved myself those steps by having this on the insulated inner cover, and the only exposure to the bees is that little hole that rises through the center of that insulated inner cover by Be Smart Designs, which for me right now is still my favorite insulated inner cover design out there. You have to put your own shim above and around that. So that works for me. And no, you didn't do it wrong. If you've already got them down on your frames themselves, that is the most efficient for the bees. They're in direct contact with it. But let me go back to that word significant. I did not see a significant change in the survivability of the colonies, in the activity of the colony, and in the consumption rate of those colonies based on whether it was put under the inner cover or on top of an insulated inner cover surrounded by additional insulation. So that still works. That's what I'm doing now, and it saves me steps. Don't have to get down in there, and the bees are not as upset. When you pull off that whole hive, even for a moment, you rile the entire colony in the middle of winter. Now, that may not be bad for you. You may not mind, but I just like to check it quick and move on. So what grandchildren are good for, too, now that we have two grandsons that are 10. We can assign them these jobs together. Moving on to question number 6. This comes from Ryan Orr 5893. That's a YouTube channel name. It says, I know this is an old post. We're looking at the video that I did showing wood preservation for your beehive components with something called Eco Wood. ECO WOOD. Says, I've got FlowHive 2 Plus and looking at using this on it. Is this still holding up for you? Does this work for the roof also, or should it be painted after using this treatment? And that word treatment, that's exactly what it is. So it's a treatment that preserves the wood. The FlowHive that he's describing here, the 2 Plus, that's a cedar hive already. So in theory, it doesn't even require any treatment at all. I like to do it. So I put the Eco Wood treatment on. By the way, get the version that has no dyes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to put it down in the video description. There'll be a link there for you to go check it out. All the home centers carry it. Amazon carries it. Eco Wood wood treatment. So what it does not do, it does not prevent your wood from cracking a little bit. It does not stop wood from warping if it's got high moisture and it's not good wood to begin with. With the FlowHive lumber, as true and straight as that stuff is, it is great for that. Including the FlowHive Classic, which is pine. Hoop pine is what they came out with. It's all good for all of that. Now, this is not on the level, for example, if you're looking for a really fantastic treatment, EnduraHive treatments. It just made me think of that. Greg Burns there in Ohio. Nature's Image Farm, they sell that EnduraHive treatment. Anyway, Eco Wood is going to prevent rot. So I've not had any boxes I've treated with Eco Wood rot out. Most of them are very stable. So what I've done is I make sure and glue all the joints. And the trickiest joint of all the joints in your bee boxes, that little thin rabbit joint up in the corner where the box comes together, that seems to warp out or cup or do something messed up more than any other part of the hive. So screw your hive boxes together and glue them together with something really good like Titebond 3 or Gorilla Glue Ultimate Wood Glue, which is waterproof, by the way. So it works great. I like it. Now, for the roof. The roofs on Flow Hives are pretty thin. They're the gabled roofs. I highly recommend painting those. I have them both ways. I let them go both ways. But I do notice that there's more movement in the unpainted versions. So if you want to maintain watertight integrity and all that stuff, exterior semi-gloss latex paint, highly recommended for the roof part. The rest of the box is probably going to last the rest of my life anyway. So that's it for question 6, and it comes in 5-gallon packets. So the packet is, you mix it with water, and those are Royal gallons or something, so it's more than actual the American 5-gallon measurement, so whatever that is. Question number 7 comes from Nori from Toulouse, France. I have a Layens hive, and I wondered if I could put fondant onto a frame of foundation to feed the colony in winter, as there is no option for above frame feeding. It says, I live in the south of France. I am Scottish, where the temp in winter can go below freezing quite frequently. Okay, so that is actually, we have Layens hive people here in the United States as well. And that was my opening thumbnail today, is for this particular mechanism right here. I want to show you 2 different things. One is if you want to do fondant, the Layens hive, the Layens frames are different. Just for example, that's a Layens frame. See how deep it is? This particular one has a wax foundation. And this comes from Dr. Leo Shurashkin at horizontalbees.com, or no, not Horizontal Bees, horizontalhive.com. Leo Shurashkin. Anyway, he sells a frame feeder just like this. So that sits in here, and then this little piece of wood that goes over the top, so then it matches up. Because the way the Layens frames are, all of these top bars of their frames come together and there's no air gap in between them, which means that feeding them is not something that you can do easily. So if you have this frame feeder, this comes, I bought this from Dr. Leo. Nothing from him was given to me, by the way, so this is not an endorsement. But he offers a frame feeder that's compartmentalized in here. You could put your fondant in these and, of course, stick that in there. But you don't have that, let's say, in France. So this question comes into play for the top bar hives too, and that's what this is for. Now, this is not designed for fondant. This is designed for if we're doing a cutout or something, or we've got some wonky comb. You can take the honeycomb and push it right onto these pegs and start a top bar with the comb from a cutout, capped brood, whatever you want, and in it goes. This just happens to also work for a single packet of fondant, which you can just trim the top a little bit, but then you'll stick these bars right through the top of the fondant. It goes all the way through. This is a 2.4 pound pack. 2 pounds, 4 ounces. And you put that on there, and then you cut your little hole in the top up here and let your bees just feed on it. So this would work for feeding for top bars, and it would also work if you just had a top bar shaped the right size for your Layens hive. Also, you could do that. And this particular little gripper comes from BEE-mindful, mindful.com. And that's where this comes from. So I can see a lot of uses for that. It doesn't even take up the full width of the bar. And it is very rigid, very tough stuff. So that's what I recommend for that. Now, let's say you don't want to do any of that. Then we're back into the Layens hive situation where the frames are unique. And because all the frames come together, some people just go to the last couple of frames. So broods down here, combination of brood and bee bread and resources. Then we have capped honey, capped honey, capped honey. And you're coming to the end of the capped honey. Some people just open that gap a little bit, just enough for your bees to come through. they lay the fondant right on top of that little open gap, and then they insulate heavily directly over the top. And if you use something like double bubble, Reflectix, however you want to say it, if that overlays the top of that, then the bees don't just move up and out, plus they don't lose all that control of the microclimate inside the space of the Layens hive, which ours from Dr. Leo are insulated with lamb's wool or sheep's wool. And so those are a few different ideas for how you might feed fondant that way. And that works. It's one of the things that actually, I know a lot of people love the Layens hives, but they have all Layens hives. And this compatibility of frames is a big source of frustration for me. Because when I need to fortify one colony or another, I can't, pull a Layens frame and stick it in a Langstroth and vice versa. You can't go back and forth. So you kind of pick your path when you want the Layens or the Langstroth. And for me personally, even though I have both, my preference for a horizontal hive is the long Langstroth, and we're going through our first winter with top-bar hives too, and I definitely see the appeal of the simplicity of a top-bar hive. The Layens hives, they're just much bigger, much deeper, and a little more challenging to work with for me personally. Question number 8 comes from Matt Smithland. That's the YouTube channel name. It says, does using black foundation make any difference? And this is on a video about the long Langstroth hive. And the question is about the different colors of foundation. Do you think it should make a difference? Because here's the thing. I also was walking around at a expo setup, and someone was showing the frames that the bees take to most, they said, because of the color of the frame. It was a yellow colored frame. Now, if they were sitting out in the bee yard, I think yellow colors definitely get the attention of bees pretty quick, and they might check things out inside the hive. So my question for them was, what's compositionally different about the different colored frames inside the hive? And they said nothing. So materially, they're identical. What about the beeswax that they put on them? Are there differences in the beeswax? No, they're identical. Well, therefore, inside the hive, it won't make any difference at all to your bees because it's dark in there and they don't see the colors. So it makes absolutely no difference the color of the foundation that you're using inside your hive. Now, it can make a difference for the beekeeper, not the bees. So the bees don't show a preference one way or the other. What does make a difference is to you when you're looking at the frames. I like black foundation, brood frames in particular, and that's because it helps me see the eggs quicker. I can see the larvae quicker and things like that. It gives me a nice contrast when I'm looking at it. I also just don't like the look of white plastic. I don't know why. It doesn't look natural to me. And so, because that's it, kind of the appeal. If it's golden, like honey colored, like this plastic here, that might be appealing to the beekeeper, but as far as the bees themselves are concerned, zero difference because they can't visually choose what they're working on. So that's it for that, and guess what? That's the last question for today. So we're down to the plant of the week. Number 1 on your list for backyard beekeepers should be to first of all find out if your bees still have enough resources. Where are they located? If you don't have thermal scans, if you're kind of a natural beekeeper and you don't want a bunch of technology, you can just go put your ear up against your hive and listen to see where they're at. Knocking on hives, people do that and stuff. It does wake them up. By the way, you can be stung in cold weather. They will fly out and commit suicide to sting you because that's just what they do. Anyway, clean the entrances. Remember, snow banked up against the hive, no big deal. Entrances, please have an opening. Mouse guards. If your entrances are large, it's time to have your mouse guards on if you haven't done it already. Hopefully this is redundant information and we're just reminding you of things that you've, I'm sure, already done. If your entrance is 3/8 of an inch high, then you don't need a mouse guard. You're okay. Cover holes and leaks, as I mentioned before, and this year I started using that aluminized tape, which is this stuff, HVAC tape. I have these rolls out in our bee kits, and it's extreme weather tape, which means you're walking around, there's a big storm coming or something like that, you can't align your boxes, and you see there's a little gap in there that you didn't notice before, the light's just right and it's passing through your hive, wrap those joints with aluminized tape. You can't, because some people like to fill gaps and stuff with propolis and beeswax and stuff like that. It's too late for that. It's too cold. So it's not going to work. And that tape is holding its own everywhere that I've put it. So it works fantastic. The other thing is you find a hive that's misaligned for some reason. If you have a bar clamp, you can, if lower box is here, next box up is shifted off to the side a little bit and it's almost opening a gap over here because of that. You put the bar clamp high over here, low over here, and you draw it into alignment nice and slow. Your propolis seal is already disrupted, so that is the easiest way. You're not lifting anything, you're just moving it all together. You can move a whole stack that way, even if it's the bottom box, the way it sits on your landing board or something like that. You can shift them gradually with a really good bar clamp. The screw type, not the grip, pistol grip type. So cover holes and leaks, clear your trays. Always pull and inspect and see what's going on. You won't probably find a lot of detritus down in your trays, in your enclosed screened bottom boards now. My only regret is that every hive I have does not have an enclosed screened bottom board right now. Even my observation hives, I have removable inserts under my observation hives, which all have screened bottoms. But now I'm going to bump those up. So it's my project for next spring. And I'm going to have a nice deep space in there. So the screen will be up here. And I have sandwich trays or hors d'oeuvre trays or whatever they're called that they sell on Amazon. It's for food, but they happen to fit perfectly. And some of them are compartmentalized for, carrots and whatever people snack on, crackers. So you slide those trays in there. They're heavy duty plastic. They're food grade. Not that that matters because the bees aren't going to touch it at all, but it's where you get to go to find your varroa mites and stuff like that. Removable tray, deeper bottom, every beehive. If I were to tell you one thing, if you're building a beehive right now and you're looking at what kind of bottom board to set up, it is a easy choice for me after all of these years. Screened bottom board, completely enclosed, so there's no free airflow through there, and a removable inserted tray that you can use to inspect and look for mite drops and stuff like that. The mites have a very difficult time. You can also slick the sides of it with, I have something called Micro Mist, but that's an industrial spray that makes your surface super slippery. It's like dirt and stuff won't even stick to it. So mites definitely can't climb it. Mites are not as capable as you think. If they have a very smooth surface, they have a hard time climbing it. So live mites that fall through the screen that are groomed off by your bees stay down there. And so that's what you want. The other thing is you've got battery devices. We've got thermal scanners. You might have the Apisalis vape systems. You might have the Everything BVAC and power stations that we can carry with us. These are self-contained units like the DeWalt power station and stuff like that. Charge them up. Don't wait till the last minute. The worst thing for you is you go to use one and it's completely dead, like zeroed out. DeWalt batteries are terrible, for example. You can lose a very expensive large DeWalt battery just by letting it go to 100% zero. So we want to keep some charge in all of your battery equipment. That's it for today. So I want to thank you for being here. If you want to submit a topic or a question that you have for a future session here, please go to thewaytobee.org, click on the page marked Contact, fill out the form, and send me what you're thinking, what you want to know about, and I'll do my best to get you the best current information that there is. I'm Frederick Dunn. This has been The Way to Bee, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend, you and your honeybees.